You're all set.
Thanks, Sabrina. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Economic and Community Development Committee of the Common Council. It's a regular meeting on June 1st, 2023. Call this meeting to order at 7:02 p.m. And I will now announce who is with us tonight with the committee. And then we have Ms. Smith, Ms. Shanahan, Mr. Hubelman, and myself, John Kites. Still waiting on a couple of folks, but I will make those their announcement when they join us.
John, I'm here. I'm here as you.
Oh,
You're double.
okay.
I'm trying to change my name.
Yes,
Darlene, I can change it for you.
Thank you.
That makes sense. Thank you, Darlene. Let the record show Darlene Young is with us as well. And we have a quorum. First item up is a public hearing on the 2023 Neighborhood Assistance Act program. Would someone like staff like to give us a brief update on just kind of overview of this before we go into the public hearing? Anyone with us? Jess, not with us yet?
No one's with us, John, but I used to do this at the redevelopment agency if you'd like me to just give a quick update on what it is.
Yeah, please.
Sure. So the state has a program, which is the Neighborhood Assistance Act tax credit program, where the redevelopment agency, as the conduit for the city, approves nonprofits the use of these tax credits. So essentially what happens is the redevelopment agency on behalf of the city submits an application package for all the nonprofit projects that wish to utilize these tax credits. And then the package then gets sent to the state. The state either approves them or denies them. In my experience, they usually approve most of them. And then once they get that approval, the nonprofits can then solicit donations where the donors would then be eligible to receive the tax credit as they are donating specifically to the project for that nonprofit. So the city's role is just ratifying that package can be sent to the state level for its approval.
Thanks, Sabrina, for that overview. Okay, now I will open up the public hearing on the 2023 Neighborhood Assistance Act program. Sabrina, do we have anyone signed up to speak?
We have 3 people in the room, but they might be here for other things. So if you wish to speak about the public hearing, please raise your hand. If not, then just stay as you are. I think we're all good, John.
Thank you. Now we'll close the public hearing and move on to public participation. If you're here to speak on any item on the agenda, please keep your comments to 3 minutes or less and announce your name to the group. Sabrina, do you want to open it up, please?
Yes. So we have Rich Bonifant. Rich, I'll allow you to talk and you should be able to unmute yourself and then speak.
Thank you. Good evening. Hi, Mr. Chairman.
Good evening.
Okay. Rich Bonifant, Park Hill Avenue. Look, the pandemic is over. It's time to get back to real meetings. All right. But I'd like to speak on item 3 and 4 under the planning and zoning part of your discussion. On item 3, don't go out of your way to chase boatyards out of the Water Street area. Recreational boating is a long time valued tradition here in Norwalk, and I'm sure the Sharks are waiting for a green light to build apartments on Water Street, okay? But my main focus is on item 4. And I'm not, I said it before for the record, I am not in favor of changing single family zones into 2-family zones, okay? But my issue is with the process. This is not an individual application where you can't talk to the zoning commissioner. This is a general citywide review of zoning things, and the zoning commissioners should be allowed to have dialogue with the community. And at the last meeting, Mr. Kleppen was kind enough to tell me that he had a discussion with the Corporation Council, and the Corporation Council is telling you guys and telling all of us that, well, he's telling the zoning commissioners they should not have any dialogue with the public, and that Mr. Kleppen is the only person they're allowed to talk to. And I don't agree with that. First off, you should be allowed to advocate for your districts and the city if you're at large. And, you know, then I'm hearing rumors that the public hearings that they're gonna have is gonna be virtual only. So there's like no interaction. This is not an individual application where you can't try to influence a zoning commissioner. This is a citywide thing, and you should be allowed to talk to anybody. They should be allowed to talk to anybody, and you should be allowed to advocate for your city. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bonifant. Do we have anyone else signed up?
I have no other hands raised in the attendee list. If there's anyone else in the attendee list that would like to speak, please raise your hand and I could promote you. I think we're all good, John.
Thank you, Sabrina. Okay, now close public participation and move on to administration, and that is the approval of the minutes of May 4th, 2023 meeting. Would someone like to move it? Anybody? Thank you, Barbara. Any, before I call for the vote, any deletions, omissions, corrections? Okay, seeing none, all in favor, please raise your hand to signify yes. Okay, Darlene?
Yes, Chairman.
Thank you, ma'am. And abstentions?
Abstention.
Thank you, Mr. Hewelman. Let the record show Mr. Hewelman abstained. The minutes pass. Okay, now up to new business, and that's the planning and zoning. Item A1, authorize Mayor Harry W. Rilling to execute any and all agreements, documents, instruments, and amendments thereto as may be necessary for the city of Norwalk to receive grant funds from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation and its National Coastal Resilience Fund grant program in the amount of $211,750. I believe we have Alexis, excuse me if I pronounce your name correctly, Cherichetti, and is here with us to speak to that. But before I call, before you begin, can someone move that item? Thank you, Mr. Hewelman. Good evening. Can you give us a brief update or an overview on what we're doing here?
Sure. So we applied for a grant last year, and we were successful in receiving funds from the National Fish and Wildlife National Fish and Wildlife Funds. They have a variety of different funding programs, and this one is the National Coastal Resilience Fund. It is, by its name, a grant that focuses on coastal resilience, and since it's coming from the National Fish and Wildlife Fund, there is a focus on natural infrastructure and its role in protecting the built infrastructure. So we've applied for a plan. It's really what we're proposing is a plan and a process to get the community engaged, understanding of different opportunities for coastal flood resilience throughout the city. The plan would hire a consultant to assist us in both the outreach, engagement, and the drafting of the plan. It is not going to focus on the stormwater infrastructure system, which is a beast separate than what we're able to tackle, but it would focus on riverine flooding, coastal flooding, due to both that nuisance tidal flooding that we're seeing more of with those high king tides, storm surge, and coastal storm flooding.
I guess I have a question. First, nice to meet you. I haven't met you since you joined the city. So this is, I guess a wide field of, of what we plan to do with this money. Is this going to go towards a study to find out how we're going to go about the process, or is this going to go directly to specific projects that are already in the works?
It is a study. So the federal funding sources like to have what's called a project pipeline in order to get funding for implementation, larger implementation funds that are bigger in scope and bigger in the funding ask. You have to have some kind of documentation that the project that you're proposing is a priority project and some kind of initial documentation of why that project will have the results that you say it will. So this is kind of that foundational study and plan that will document both proposed implementation projects that involve natural infrastructure and habitat restoration. And then it will also look at planning and kind of policy actions that the city can take to increase resilience throughout the city.
Okay, are we going to go out to RFP for this to secure someone to help us with this study?
Yes, so the grant required the advanced planning of multiple steps of moving towards the plan. So there will be a steering committee. The steering committee which needs to be formed soon, will be helping with the purchasing department to come up with a RFP for a consultant that would have expertise in coastal flooding and natural infrastructure.
Yeah, such a specific number. Do we think this number will be able to achieve our goals with the amount that's been allocated?
I believe so, yes.
No, that's great. Okay. Any other questions? No? All right, good stuff. All right. All in favor, please raise your hand and signify yes.
Yes.
Thank you, Tony. Great. Motion approved. Pleasure to meet you.
Thank you, Chairman Kites.
Thank you. Okay, item A2, authorize Mayor Harry W. Rilling to execute any and all agreement documents, instruments, and amendments thereto as may be necessary for the city of Norwalk to receive grant funds from the state of Connecticut, acting by the Connecticut Port Authority through the Small Harbor Improvement Projects Program in the amount of $44,000. Oh, I believe you'll be speaking to this item, Mr. Kleppen.
Yes, good evening. The Harbor Management Commission has been talking to our staff for a long time, and we've done some research on this. There are several areas within the city that have street ends that are either inaccessible to the public or have possibly been sort of semi-taken over by a neighboring property owner as an extension of their own property. When in actuality it's city property, denying, the public access to the water, which is obviously a big priority for a lot of people in the city. So the Harbor Management Commission applied for a grant to evaluate these street ends. We've identified at least 16 right now that we're going to take a look at, and then pick 5 of those to kind of develop like an improvement plan for those. And it could be a range of things, whether it's providing more public access, it could be for a small boat launch. But the idea would be wherever the final locations are chosen, that they would be kind of consistent with what the neighborhood is, because some of these neighborhood areas are, in strictly residential areas. So trying to turn it into something that draws too many people might overload the, a dead end street in terms of the parking or what the capacity of that piece of property can handle. So we want to be cognizant of that. But it's an idea to reclaim the, the waterfront, get access to that waterfront for different parts of the community, because the range it goes from East Norwalk to Shorefront Park down to Woodward Avenue, down to points further south. So the idea would be it's a public access point, and it's also a neighborhood access point for those folks who maybe couldn't get at the water previously.
Okay. Any questions? Thanks, Steve. All in favor, please raise your hand and signify yes.
Yeah.
For you too.
Thank you.
I'll move it too.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I had a big question mark to move it. Thank you, Barbara, and we all voted, and it passed unanimously. Great. Okay, Steve, stay with us for the item 3, waterfront study discussion. We're continuing this conversation regarding the waterfront study, and with us we have folks from Utah as well to kind of help us get on track and hopefully give us some direction and answer some questions. Jessica, will you be leading the show, or is Steve? I guess kind of like where we ended off, where we are now, what's different.
Lead the show now that I'm not muted, but I wanted to have Steve has worked really hard with the team to be able to identify some potential resolutions to some of the concerns that have been brought by this committee. And so I wanted to run through quickly what we've been looking at and just to be able to get feedback. And there is no action tonight, but I do think that I am optimistic that what you see here will bring some resolution to the conversations that we have been having over the last several months. So we're going to go through some existing zoning as it exists today, the proposed zoning that you saw that was included in the waterfront study, which included those options that we had looked at. We're going to talk a little bit about this solution that we think is a viable solution for those waterfront parcels that we were talking about, specifically Commerce and Water Street. And then we'll bring forward a new recommendation, and then we'll talk a little bit about the impacts to the waterfront study as it stands today and some next steps. So we can glaze by this pretty quickly. Obviously, Steve is the technical expert in all of this, but we just wanted to show that right now we have Water Street as marine commercial, and we have the areas along Commerce as industrial. And so this is what our current existing zoning is today. And with the zoning rewrite, we had peeled away some of the waterfront study parcels, and specifically what this committee was focused on was Commerce Street and Water Street. And what the current proposed zoning shows in the waterfront study today, which is what led to a lot of the discussion, is that we were looking at continuing a heavy industrial use and a mixed use heavy industrial commercial along those two corridors, along the corridor beginning up where the Divine properties are and coming down where the King properties are. And that's what we had heard some concerns about. In addition to that, we had also heard some concerns about what the proposed zoning waterfront study included for the marine commercial piece of it, and thinking about how to transition from more of a retail pedestrian type use closer to Washington, and thinking about how to really balance the marine commercial. And so, heard the public comment about Norwalk being water-based and it being very important to continue the water-based activities that we do here in the city, and thinking about some of the industry there as well and where the job base is going to come from. And so, one of the things that Steve looked at with the team was a zoning type that we had in place currently. And the zoning type is called CD 5W. And right now, O&G is actually zoned, is proposed to be zoned as CD 5W. But this particular zone allows for artist space and civic uses, entertainment, mixed use development, which includes multifamily, it includes retail and restaurants and a commercial aspect to it. It's a little bit different than some of the other densities that we've seen or some of the other districts we've seen, because it has a water dependency component to it. So the mixed use development that we would see actually requires some sort of water use. What is that water use? Well, it could potentially be retail or a restaurant that has boat slips attached to it. It could be residential buildings that have a boating aspect to it. But it really is more of a higher density mixed use. And it could include anything from residential, as I said, to civic, to marine uses. One of the things that we are looking at right now in the zoning, the district CD5W is 6 stories, but we think it should actually be 4 stories. So we would recommend that we would reduce it to 4 stories. And the other piece of this is that it's really important that along these particular corridors that we have public access to the water. But in addition to that, it's also important that pedestrians and people who are using the street have access to be able to see the water from an optic standpoint. And we are incorporating different view sheds between and view areas from the street itself. They are 26-foot wide spaces that would separate the buildings in order for the public to be able to see the water. And so this is one of those zones that Steve was telling me that we only really had like 2 or 3 parcels in the city that had this particular zoning. But when we went back and we looked at all of the concerns that the commission had and that the committee had and that the council had, we started to realize that this was a really good potential solution to thinking about how to address these waterfront parcels to be able to be a little bit more of a higher density, but balance out the water dependency piece and really be able to increase that public access. So one of the things that we wanted to do was make a recommendation that the Commerce Street stretch, including the King properties, be changed over from that industrial use that you had saw in the waterfront study as it exists today to the CD5W Urban Center Waterfront Community District zoning, which is the slide that I had just showed. Now, there may be questions about why the bottom of Commerce, why it's showing SDHI, which is still that industry use. One of the things that we've talked about internally is the absolute importance that the river continue to be federally dredged, and that the federal dredging is even more important because if we're going to be able to have residential and mixed use up higher north on the river, that we want to be able to have there be water in the river. And without the dredging, that's not always possible. And so we want to make sure that we're keeping some industry in the area. We want to make sure that we're keeping some jobs in the area. But we also want to make sure that there's a reason for the Army Corps to be able to come in and actually dredge up the river. And that will then allow access and boat traffic up higher, which of course relates to the replacement of the walk bridge and ensuring that the walk bridge can be moved and that it allows boat traffic up and down the river. So this is what we're proposing for the waterfront study for the Commerce piece. For the Water Street side of the house, we think that it's really important to continue to include some marine commercial. And we, even from hearing Rich speak and talking with different residents and talking with different folks around the city, we know that Norwalk has such a strong use of water, and there are industries that relate to that, right? And a lot of them are fixing boats, being able to store boats, being able to know that you have the ability to bring your boat onto land and be able to have it fixed when you need it. But again, we were hearing that there should be a little bit more of a transition between what we're seeing on Washington and maybe not have such a heavy load of marine commercial all along the stretch of Water Street. And that also related to the public access to the water from Water Street and being able to ensure that people can access the water there. So again, with that CD5W district, we have the ability to, again, look at mixed use zoning, look at retail commercial. It does have the water dependency piece, which is again why it says 5W. The W indicates the water related or water dependent uses. But we feel like this is more balanced in the sense of what the committee was looking for. So in saying that, if we were to move forward with those recommendations, which we currently are, then we would need to make a few changes to the waterfront study as you've seen it in the past, the first draft of it. And we would be looking to revise recommendations for Commerce Street to include two options, which would include both the CD5W zoning, which is what we've recommended and what we will continue to recommend, or open space, but not the industrial that we had heard concerns about. Only that more industrial piece for the King property. And for Water Street, we'd be looking to revise the recommendations to include CD5W on more of those northern parcels, which includes Hannaford up to Washington. And if we were to do something like that, then what we could do over the next month is we could work with UTIL, and Tim Love is on the call with us today to be able to answer any technical questions about the waterfront study. And Tim's been really great with his team and working with us to find some resolution to some of the concerns and to think a little bit about how we can revise the waterfront study plan. But we would be doing that in June, and then in July, we would come back to you. And on July, we would seek approval to amend the POCD to be able to incorporate and adopt the waterfront study with the recommendations. And from there, we would ask that if there is approval given by this committee, then we would bring it to the Common Council, and then we would be able to continue the zoning rewrite, but we would incorporate the recommendations that we presented tonight, which is that CD5W.
Oh, definitely sounds like you heard what the committee had to say, Jess. Any questions for Utah or anyone else? Ms. Young?
Thank you, Chair. Jess, can you just give me an example of what a CDW 5W business or entity would, an example of what it could be moving upward towards Washington Street and Hanford?
Yeah, so
And is
what I
that,
was-
and is that site already kind of identified? Is that where it was kind of empty by the, where the police kept their
oh, the
marine
marine unit.
unit? Yeah.
So it's farther down than where the police are keeping their marine unit because it includes, I think the marine unit. Oh, the marine unit might be right at Hanford.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because we were looking at Raymond. So I think, so this shows Raymond. We were talking about Hannaford or Raymond. Hannaford is more where that the police building is.
Mm-hmm.
And we can't forget that one of the things that was discussed was potentially if the walk bridge was to take those parcels, would it be, we weren't sure if the property owner would retain ownership there and be looking to do something sort of development, or if the city may potentially have those parcels through the right of first refusal. And that's still to be determined. It's not exactly, we're not exactly certain of what that will look like. Although I do think that the property owner has interest in retaining that particular property. But I feel like what we're thinking of, Darlene, is more of a residential mixed use building where the main floor is activated, and then the main floor has the ability to support public access to the water on the water side, and that there would potentially be some sort of dock system or slip system where boaters could potentially come up to the shore, use the slip or use the docking system and be able to get off there and then access our downtown or access the actual restaurants themselves. The other thing that we were thinking was that if there were mixed use residential units in the 5W that either here or farther up on Commerce, that potentially the homeowners could the developers could potentially build a dock system or a slip system for the residents, and the residents would be able to house their boats there in some way. But I think what we're thinking of is, how do you activate that space with really great restaurants and really great markets and really great pedestrian walkways so that people that are accessing downtown and people that are, in walking around and living down here actually can walk down a pedestrian laneway to the water and sit on a bench and hang out for the afternoon or drink coffee or whatever it happens to be. And so trying to really facilitate that access piece. And we're trying to balance that we're trying to balance the public access piece with the marine commercial piece, and trying to figure out how to do both of those things in some way that allows the public, more than anything, that allows the public access. And I think that that's the biggest piece that we're trying to achieve, and how to really draw people to the water. Right now on Water Street, you can hardly really even see the water, and people definitely don't have access to those really long skinny lots where the water is. So how do you draw people back there? And I think that'll be that's part of what we're trying to look for.
Thank you.
And this is Tim Love, from UTIL. The waterfront plan has some diagrams that demonstrate some examples of the kinds of mix of uses that Jess is talking about. So we spent a lot of time thinking about how to do that, even in the waterfront plan as it exists.
Is this a zoning designation that's popular or used, widely used, or is this something we kind of just combined this and that and came up with this?
So this designation is part of the overall zoning, getting into a little bit of the weeds, but the zoning transect, because it's a form-based code. So this is one of the transects, which is kind of like an urban urban waterfront transect. So it's common, but not common in every community because if they don't have waterfront, but
Well,
it's
obviously,
in
right.
the spectrum.
Yeah, and we did the waterfront study before it was turned into zoning code. But this is part of the transect that the zoning consultant is using to do the full zoning. This is one of the choices.
Any other questions? Please speak up. I can't see you all. If you have a
Sorry,
question.
Chairman David Huvelman.
Yes, Mr. Boone.
So going back up on the Commerce Street area up there, with this CD5W, if we wanted to change it into green space, how difficult does that? Is that a simple marriage, or is that a difficult process?
Well, you would need to go through, so through the zoning rewrite, we would recommend this zoning type. If it was pushed back by the public and pushed back by others, and we wanted to make it green space, then it would be a zoning amendment to, if the zoning rewrite was passed and we adopted the CD5W and we decided that we wanted it to be green space, then we would have to go through and do a zoning amendment where we would have to change the parcels that we want to green space. So it would be the full, and Steve can get into it, but it's a full process where there's public hearings and we need to notify many different bodies to be able to seek their approval in order to go through that. So it's not necessarily a light lift, but it's definitely 100% possible to be able to do that. I think where Steve was headed and what his team was thinking about with UTIL and also the zoning rewrite was that if the waterfront study that Tim and his team is working on has options in it like CD5W and open space, then as different property owners today start to decide and make decisions with their property moving forward, then we have both options available to us, that we could go with more of this more urban center style of zoning, but also we could potentially adopt certain parcels as open space and have them be, complementary to one another moving forward. So that's the idea with the waterfront study, is to peel off that industrial use, but to have both of those be a recommendation so that moving forward, they're both a possibility.
I think the other part of that is if it's in the plan as potentially open space or, city parcel, that say that the property owner decides to sell the property, maybe they approach the city and the city's interested in purchasing the property. It strengthens the city's ability to seek grant funding because it's something the city's already contemplated in terms of acquiring that land for open space or green space. So, but Jess is right. If that was the case, eventually down the road, we would change the zone to probably the civic zone to match it up. But I think that's a kind of a minor step in the process. Acquiring the land would be the big step, and getting the funding to do that would be a big step.
So this seems like the CD5W gives a broader range, which is kind of what the conversations had been turning to, but a broader range that stays in a sort of mixed use philosophy than just saying heavy industrial or just saying specifically marine use. Am I understanding that right?
You are. So we're basically stripping the industrial piece out of it, right? So there's still retail allowed, there's still commercial allowed, there's still mixed use allowed, there's still offices allowed, residential's allowed, artist spaces allowed, but there's not the heavy industrial use that we had heard this body, have concern with. So there's that we've stripped out of the more northern piece. And then again, we've left the higher industry use at the bottom on the more southern part. But again, that's a very specific strategic reason why we're thinking of it as that.
And I just because I haven't been involved with the zoning more recently, our existing non-conforming uses grandfathered with some upside about improvements they can make to their property before they're non-conforming.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Yep. Okay.
Thanks.
That was-
I had my hand up. That was my question. You just
Yeah, I was going to lead into that. Go ahead, Barbara.
Yeah.
I'll leave
No,
it.
he just answered my question. You know, we're talking, we're setting ourselves up for the future. You
Setting-
know,
which is
we're not looking to throw anybody out.
Right. So this
Yeah.
is, you know, and I think this is sort of like where Steve has been coming from for the last couple months, is the thinking of that, you know, all of the existing uses, even though they'd be non-conforming, are grandfathered in. So this could be 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. It could be for as long as that business wants to live and be there and have that use in place, you know? And I think for us, part of it is thinking about zoning and what we want to see for the future of the city, and perhaps making, you know, trying to shape the future of the city in a certain way by indicating what zoning we'd like to see and what uses we'd like to see. But that doesn't mean by any means that the day that this is passed, that those businesses will need to leave or will need to change or will need to change any of the business practices in which they do. This is just really a long-term, you know, this is not a short to midterm sort of goal. This is more of a mid to long-term goal, I would say. And also indicates to, you know, and is controversial, I would say, for the city and Steve's team, and thinking about what those businesses want for their properties and what they're hoping for their properties, and sort of then balancing what that long-term plan for the business is versus what the city sees for that particular area, and trying to be able to make sure that everyone has context and perspective as to why those decisions are being made.
And I think this is a good balanced plan relative to the dredging issues that Jess mentioned at the beginning of her presentation, which is this still requires dredging north of 95 because of the map as you see it. Just one other consideration is that the only way to get to all of those properties from United Marine south to 95 is through at-grade crossings. And that's going to impede development through other regulatory reasons too, which is that, you know, the getting permission for future uses to cross at grade through an active rail corridor, that there's that one slice isn't accessible directly from a public right-of-way that doesn't have to cross that corridor at grade. Those crossings are Railroad, Jennings, and Science, which I think everybody knows.
Yeah, which is really, it's up here. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but just north of this Commerce, north of the Commerce road sign or road labeling.
Yeah, or I can share my screen and show an aerial map if that's easier to understand. But that's something else that we've discussed with Steve and Jess recently, which is what's even feasible for development short term because of the at-grade rail crossing issue, which is also grandfathered with the businesses that are there.
So I think, sorry, go ahead.
I just had a question. Can you go back to that map again, Jess?
Yep.
The question I have is the area that's just south of 95, that's that lightish blue. What is the SDMC? What is that distinction, Steve?
That's marine commercial. That's proposed to go to the marine commercial zone.
So that stays marine commercial. And then does that help with, you know, the dredging issue by that staying in a marine commercial? We have some heavy industrial on that side. I'm looking, you know, 40, 50 years. This stuff's not going to change overnight. So
Potential, I think it depends on what actually is occurring on the property, not so much the zoning designation.
okay, thank you.
So again, just to go back to next steps, I think if everyone here is comfortable with what we've shown today, then we'll work with UTL to be able to revise that waterfront study plan. And then we would bring it back to you in July with, again, that CD5W zoning and also open space or civic zoning for the Commerce Street piece. And then those the Water Street pieces also changed over to that particular designation of the CD5W. And we would bring that back to you. And again, just as a reminder, it would be that we're looking for the Common Council to amend the POCD to incorporate the waterfront study plan. And then as a result of that, we would move forward with those recommendations as part of the zoning rewrite for those particular areas.
It's a quick question, Jess. Does that Does the incorporation into the POCD need to happen before the full adoption of the new zoning regulations?
It does, because part of the zoning rewrite is that we're doing citywide. So we want to be able to have the zoning designation be on each particular parcel when the Planning and Zoning Commission votes to be able to move forward with zoning, right? So the waterfront study should be passed before zoning. And then as part of that, Steve's team will make the recommendations that are identified from the waterfront study as part of that zoning rewrite.
And are these items that are going to be able to be discussed in these public hearings that you're doing?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And part of that is working with UTL and working with our other zoning study team that has a very interesting acronym of a name, and only Steve is probably technically able to even say what the acronym is. But part of that is prepping up for the public hearings on June the 21st and June the 28th, so that we have the ability to get the feedback from the public about the recommendations that are going to be put forth.
Great. Thank you.
I just see there's
No one else?
no, I think that's Steve. Did you want to add anything before we wrap this up?
No, that kind of leads into the next agenda item anyway, so that's fine.
Okay, great.
The plan is, seems like the consensus is, I don't know, warm, I guess, lack of a better word, and then you're going to spend the next month kind of putting this together and then bring it before us in July for approval. Is that the plan, Jess?
Yep, that is the plan.
Okay, seeing other hands up. Yes, Steve, why don't you continue this conversation in this time regards to the zoning rewrite update?
Yeah, and I won't take too much of your time. So we've been going out and having a series of neighborhood meetings. We finished technically, I think, the last one of the council districts last week at the library. I think it was Wednesday night last week. We're still doing different meetings, meeting with city boards and city agencies such as Zoning Board of Appeals I did last week. We have one coming up, I think, with Harbor Management Commission and some smaller neighborhood groups. So we'll do that. And I think a realtor group has suggested that they'd like to chat, and we're working with the Chamber of Commerce on setting up another meeting with different, like any business owners, or, really kind of looking at also like architects, engineers, attorneys that deal with land use, because they are going to have very specific questions about, how are we implementing this particular provision in the regulations? What does it mean? How is it adopted? So we're kind of working on that. Jess had mentioned the two hearings are scheduled June 21st and June 28th. Basically, it's just to get, we've got a lot of feedback and a lot of very similar comments, so we kind of know what to expect. And what we're kind of going through now, and you probably saw the mayor's discussion a week or two ago about some of the upzoning concerns. We've gone back and kind of cut back on some of the areas proposed for upzoning, and we'll have the Planning and Zoning Commission next Wednesday, the 7th. We're going to talk to them about the changes that we've proposed, get their feedback on those changes, and then we'll post that map up there for public comment, public distribution. And, I think that will diffuse a lot of the comments. There's going to be certain areas that probably you're still not going to be thrilled. But I think it takes a lot of the contentious things out off the table, and, maybe it'll calm things down a little bit on that front. And we've also, the next thing we're going to do, which I hope to wrap up by next Friday, is getting the public comments that we've gotten so far, whether they've come in electronic or email or come in with a letter, and we're going to address each one of those in a kind of a spreadsheet format, post all that on our page, let the public see it, let the commission see it, and which kind of gives the commission a sense of what the public is saying prior to the 21st and the 28th. And the last thing I'll mention is we're working on a kind of a sustainability roundtable discussion, which we might do on the 28th, or we might have to do at a separate meeting. I know this body, as well as the Planning and Zoning Commission, has been pushing us to do, get as much sustainability into the regulations as possible. But then we're also getting questions on the back end. So what does it actually mean? What are the implications? What are the costs? Does it add to development costs? Then that get pushed on to who's ever, potentially a renter in that building. So we're trying to pull together a different kind of stakeholder group with experience in this area beyond what our team has knowledge of, and then kind of pose a bunch of questions to them, let the commission ask them questions to give us a better handle on the direction we proposed and whether we should go further, we've gone too far, and what the actual impacts are.
Steve, you mentioned taking out some of the controversial things out of the plan. And I mean, for the most part, the most controversial thing being going from one family to two family. Are you referring to that being taken out of the plan?
Yeah, and we're not proposing it entirely. So I'm happy to come back next month and show you, go through the map changes again. We've scaled back in some areas. We kind of followed some guidelines, which I think I talked about last time. We focused our areas in and around mass transit, around infrastructure, around major employment centers, and applied some buffers to those areas, and then tried to fill in some of the gaps where it just didn't make sense to leave pockets of one zone versus another. But we have scaled that back and brought it, I think, to where it makes a little more sense and hopefully is more palatable for everybody. Oh, John, you're muted. Sorry.
No, sorry, my bad. I'm gonna call you back. Okay, all right. That's good news. I mean, obviously, there's been a lot of talk, so and I was no big fan of that change myself. Okay, any other questions? Oh, Ms. Shanahan?
Yeah, so I'm sort of following up too, because as you know, Steve, definitely in my district, the zoning to two family was causing a lot of issues. But also in West Norwalk, the idea of leaving 1 acre zoning has been something I've been getting a lot of feedback. I don't know, are you getting that feedback, or do you need me to say I've gotten 20 emails or 20 phone calls and people stop me in the street about that? Or is that on your radar?
Yes, it is. And Brian in my office has been going and doing a very laborious and tedious exercise of looking at basically on a parcel by parcel basis in the 1 acre zone, with the idea of concern of if you remove the minimum lot area standard, is that going to end up with a rash of new development sites? We didn't think so from the beginning, and it turns out percentage wise, we think it's really small, but he's still running some of the numbers. He should have that done any day now, I would think. But I'm happy to report back on that.
Yeah, it'd be great to get back to my district, because they still don't like it, and they still think that, that could actually cause a lot more density. And then there's also concerns about the watershed, because it's really important watershed area. So the loss of ground to soak up in an area that floods already. So there is a lot of concerns around that.
Yep.
Not just the density, but also the flooding. Thanks.
Okay, any other questions for Steve? Okay, thanks, Steve. Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay. I attended 3 of the meetings, 2 in person and 1 via Zoom. And it was really helpful for me to hear the comments from the residents. And so, Steve, I think you've really done a good job of listening and pulling back, it sounds like to me, particularly in the, the 1 to 2 family, where, I heard a lot of concerns in 2 districts. One thing that I've been hearing also from some constituents is around multifamily in some of the more historic areres, particularly around Golden Hill. So, I just want to put that out there, that's something that's I'm just starting to hear a lot of, and I was not able to attend that particular meeting. So I'll look it up online and see what was said there.
Yeah, I'm actually meeting with Golden Hill next week.
Great. Great.
And I mean, that's one area that we're still kind of tinkering with, because we get, the concerns. And so, yeah, we're still looking at that.
Yeah. Okay, good. Thank you.
I did want to share that Steve's team put out 19,000 flyers directly to addresses in both English and Spanish to be able to encourage folks to come to the June 21st and June 28th hearing. So hopefully you'll see those hit your mailboxes. And if any of your constituents want to have more information or want to get those links, they can connect with us and we can provide more info for them. But I think a really good effort on outreach from the P&Z standpoint on making sure that people know this is going on, both through the social media outlets, but also the mailers that we've been doing, which I think is great.
Yeah, they're supposed to arrive technically starting tomorrow. I wasn't going to say anything just in case there was some kind of error with the mailing. I didn't want to build myself too high, but they're supposed to arrive Friday and Saturday, I'm told. So
That's ARPA funding.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Yeah, just not really a question. I just wanted to make a comment. I wanted to say thank you to Steve, your team, to the waterfront team, the consultants. You guys have done a huge lift with this, and it's appreciated. But also, what I'm finding is you guys are listening to what the community is saying, and you're adjusting. You're listening to what is being said in committee here, what the commission is saying, and you guys are making adjustments on the move. And we know that, you know, it's hard to find the utopian where everyone is happy with everything that's there, but you're working to try to figure out what that balance is. And I wanted to say thank you for doing that. I appreciate that you guys are working in that direction.
thank you.
Yeah, definitely good job to Steve and the team.
Okay, seeing no other hands up, we will call this conversation, move on to the next item, which would be item B1, authorize Mayor Harry W. Rilling to execute all documents to renew the contract for marketing service between the City of Norwalk and Dorenberg Kallenbach Advertising LLC for $150,000. Account number noted. Would someone like to move this item? Thank you, Ms. Shanahan. I believe Sabrina, you'll be speaking to this item.
Yep, so I'll kick it off for us, but Todd from DKA is actually here tonight to give you guys a quick rundown on the progress he's made since the start of the campaigns that we've launched over the past few years, new and old. So Visit Norwalk, as well as Norwalk for Business, which was just launched in November. Todd's group has done a great job, not only launching these new campaigns for us, but also managing and helping us spend down the advertising dollars to really translate into physical visits to Norwalk and, you know, new people coming to Norwalk and making sure, you know, our economy and our business community is supported in the best way that we can. As many of you know, we moved from a model of basically only including our downtowns to including all of Norwalk and really selling the city as a whole and being able to have a platform for all of our businesses to participate, all of our residents to have a resource that they can go to for information, for events, deals, itineraries, all that fun stuff. But also on top of that, drawing people from the tri-state area that we never really focused on or talked about in the past. So Todd's group has done a fantastic job for us, especially on the little one-off projects we kind of throw at him at the last minute. So I'll throw it over to Todd to go over kind of what he's done in the past. And as you guys have questions, or if you have anything that you want to add to his presentation that he could potentially answer for you, he's happy to do that. So Todd, you should be able to share your screen. I know you have a presentation ready.
I do. Hello, everyone. Okay. No, I don't want to take the tour. Of course, Acrobat covers my thing here. Let's switch to PowerPoint. I think that's better. All right, I'll get started. There we go. So I'm going to give you a summary of the marketing efforts that we're involved with that support economic and community development in the city. And our contract started in November of 2020 initially with business marketing support and parking promotion, a contract shared, if you will, between the city and the Norwalk Parking Authority, now known as Park Norwalk. And then 2 months into that, the city issued another RFP specifically for tourism. So that was added to, we were selected and that was added to our responsibilities. And then in November of 2021, economic and community development piece was initiated. So now we kind of cover the waterfront, if you will, pardon the pun, with efforts to support consumer spending in the city, tourism, business development and retention and growth. These are the scope of services provided by my firm that help, facilitate those endeavors, everything from developing the two brands of Visit Norwalk and Norwalk for Business and the websites to ongoing social media management, e-newsletters, running promotions, doing ad campaigns, PR, providing design services and videography, et cetera. And then reporting the key performance indicators so we know what some of these efforts are delivering in terms of actual results. We talk about some of the goals for marketing in the city, and it's to create a distinct identity for Norwalk as a destination, a place to explore, dine, shop, play, stay, live, work, and do business. And we have metrics in terms of direct campaign engagement. A lot of this is digital and social, so we can look at and web driven, so we can look at clicks and likes and follows, et cetera. We also are tracking business and attraction visits and revenues. Some of this is in terms of anecdotal evidence by talking and keeping a pulse on the business community. Some of it's actually measurable by some techniques we use in the ad campaign that I'll talk about in a minute that can actually track visitors who see the marketing actually make visits to the city. In terms of the business development side, again, we've been supporting the department in terms of marketing their services to help with business acquisition, development, and retention. We'll talk about that in a minute as well too. There are other measurement metrics that, again, in looking at year to year, I know the city has a pulse on, how are the revenues doing? I've listened to and attended some of the parking authorities meetings as well too, so they can track how revenues are coming in as well as the growth in the tax base. And of course, that's going to be driven by more workers and more people living in the city. So hopefully this is the funnel. We've got a lot of results coming in at the top, and hopefully that translates into some measures for the city on the whole at the bottom in terms of revenues and growth of the tax base. A lot of our work is digitally and socially driven. Visit Norwalk, the website, we've begun. It's kind of the hub of our activities. It was started as a resource for the small business community to have a place where they can list their business and what they offer, list their events, but it's become also a place where visitors to the city can come and explore, find out what's here, and actually plan their trips. There are itineraries, sorry, I can't say that word, itineraries on the website of suggested things to do, and it changes out seasonally as well too. The campaign is also mobile responsive, if you will, so you can access these resources on any device. Norwalk for Business is the counterpart. It was a new website that was launched this past November. And this is a place where we kind of quantify and qualify Norwalk as a place to establish a business, small or large. We have business success stories, a lot of those drawn from Norwalk's creative economy, if you will. Some of the arts, the schools that are in the city, some of the unique manufacturing, and some of the tech industry is profiled in there as well too. There's also resources including LoopNet, where you can at any given time see what's available for lease or sale in terms of commercial property in the city. And there's also a detailed list of what businesses can expect in dealing with the Economic and Community Development Department, everything from financial incentives to grants, to, Sabrina and her team going out and doing walking tours of businesses and holding seminars on a regular basis. So this is, again, the hub that businesses can use, and there are spokes that come back to that. So we manage social media as well too on a daily basis, and e-newsletters. This is another site that we developed as a resource. Norwalk Restaurant Week is next week, starts Monday and goes through Sunday, and a number of participating restaurants have come up with special menus at special pricing. So we're promoting that this week as well too. And again, this this is a place where people go, norwalkrestaurantweek.org, to actually see who's participating. You can click on any of those logos and the menu will pop up to see, so you can compare and contrast what you want to have for dinner or lunch the next day. This is the dashboard that we issue back to the city every month. It kind of shows how we're doing in terms of what the digital assets are delivering. This is a look back at the entire year for 2022. In terms of e-newsletters, I mentioned they go out every Monday. There's a version for consumers or visitors. There's another version for businesses that's just slightly different. But we on a regular basis, we have 1,200 consumers subscribed, and in terms of the business community, 300 that we qualify as participating. They have listings on the websites, or they send us their promotions and their events, and a list of another 550 prospective businesses who we talk to, and we want to encourage to again send us their information so they can be considered participating businesses. The website, since its launch, coming up on almost 2 years, it's had 43,000 unique visits. This was actually at the end of 2022. But the total for visits in 2022 alone was 35,000. On the right side of the graph here, you see some of the social media engagement. We primarily are using Facebook and Instagram. Last year, we reached over 1 million people in terms of impressions on Facebook, and about 500,000 using Instagram. The engagement is actually inverse on that. There's more engagement in terms of likes and follows and people clicking on posts with Instagram. But if you kind of look down, I know this is a little hard to read, but the circular graph there, the pink is female, the purple is male. So we're skewing about 60-40 on who's participating and who's being reached by social media. You can also see in the bar charts what the age spread is, and Instagram's kind of pushing toward the younger 30 and under crowd, whereas Facebook has more reach into pretty much across the board from 35 to 55 plus. Those little
Do you
squares-
mind? I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, sure.
Can you go back to the slide real quick with the restaurant week?
Yeah, sure.
Thanks. What was your outreach for this? Because I'm just looking at it. I remember it was similar last year. I mean, there are very few restaurants, and the bulk of that is owned by the same person. Like, what did you do to reach out to restaurants or other restaurants around Norwalk? Did you?
Yeah, these screenshots from last week, so they're still coming in. There's more on that page now, and of course there's more that scrolls below the fold. So we have an email list for restaurants that's got about 200 contacts on there. So they will receive each restaurant manager for whom we had an address or owner received 3 invitations that way. We've been promoting it weekly in the e-newsletters, and we also have been working with the Hearst, Connecticut newspaper. So there's an article that broke today too that details some this. So there's an ad for this on all of their websites that's promoting this as well too. We've had new people come in each time. We've had some drop off each time as well too. Right now we're at, I think, 10 restaurants, many of whom are doing lunch and dinner menus. And I kind of keep score based on what I see happening also in places like New Haven and Hartford. And it's kind of cyclical. We try to pick a week where we're not going to conflict with Fairfield's Restaurant Week, for example, or New Haven's Restaurant Week. And I also kind of nestled this in between weeks where restaurants can really make their money with graduations or Mother's Day or Father's Day. We don't want to impact on that. But
can you explain the specifics though? Like if a restaurant signs up, they're offering
sure. I'm sorry.
Dinner menu or lunch menu for a discounted rate, or how's that all work?
Yeah, we suggest we do, but most of them are kind of falling in line with this, that they come up with a special menu that includes a 3-course dinner, and that would be appetizer, entree, and dessert. So we have to be a little bit flexible with, like, so no 1420. It's mostly a cocktail flight, but anyway. And we asked them to create that menu, offer that for the week at a discounted price. The suggested price is $20.23, but most of them are coming in around between $20 and $35 for that menu. And again, they put the menu together. We help them, or they give us a PDF that's linked from this, so anybody can look at this menu in advance and again see what's being offered for that price. And in return, each restaurant gets a profile. They get a social media post, and they'll be featured in the newsletters as well, too, in addition to this website. And then we're cross-pollinating this microsite with links back and forth to visit Norwalk.
And I'll also just jump in to add to that, John. We also, so along with Todd's emails to our business list that we, house on our servers, we also posted on our social media as well as the city social media. Michelle, the communications director, also cross-pollinated onto the city's normal social. So we had more generalized outreach on that front as well.
Okay. I guess, yeah, I wasn't on that list. All right. Can you please move on, son? Proceed.
Thank you. Did that answer your question, I hope?
Yes, very clearly.
Okay. I'll go through this pretty quickly because I know that you guys had this in your packet as well too, but I wanted to touch on the tourism ad campaign that was launched in October 2021. As Sabrina mentioned, this is a way of reaching out beyond Norwalk and Fairfield County into the tri-state area. And you can see by this circular overlay on the map, it's got a pretty broad reach. It encompasses a 30 to 50 mile drive radius, which we felt was an appropriate 1 hour drive market or train trip market, if you will, for people to come for the day or to have a daycation or a weekend maybe in Norwalk at the most. They're not going to spend a week here, but realistically they can spend at least a good portion of a day or 2 days. We're reaching visitors. We want to get more social engagement through this campaign, drive traffic to the website, as well as get more people into the city. And we're looking at a pretty broad demographic of adults and families. We kind of focused on what you can do with kids, as well as what you can do with your significant other. And again, it's primarily digitally focused, so it has broad reach. It has targeting in terms of we can choose demographics and geography, and it's very data driven in terms of kind of having a pulse on what's happening to drive web traffic and have engagement. There's a seasonality to this. We invest more during the warm weather months of April to November than we do in December to March. This is a look back at last year. Of course, there was over 900 impressions driven off the ad campaign that drove almost 19,000 web visits and a measurable, at least almost 1,500 actual visits to Norwalk. In the peak months, it's the top table where we're using Facebook, Instagram, this technique of mobile geofencing that will deliver ads to you if you've got your mobile device on in some of the places that we're targeting. For example, if you were at the Bronx Zoo, we would deliver an ad to you advertising the Maritime Aquarium, and then we can track people who actually make those visits. They get pinged in one zone, go to another. We're also using video as a technique too, both on social as well as on some YouTube placements. And then we scale that back in some of the colder weather months where there's not as much going on. We're also, as I mentioned, working with Hearst, Connecticut. They're the major news resource in your market. They have 6 major newspapers in Fairfield County and New Haven County. We're doing things like sponsored content articles. As an example on the right here. Again, the one that just came out today is Restaurant Week focused. And again, we're using some of their tools, some of their social media channels we can tag onto their messaging and their reach, and some display ads, video, etc. And again, this was almost another 4 million impressions last year. We've been working with News 12 in the peak months of April through June. Again, they're using their reach into the same overall target market that we've profiled, this 35 to 50 mile radius, which encompasses a good portion of Connecticut, as well as the Bronx and Westchester. They're running both 30-second commercials and these 10-second billboards, which is every time news pops up, and we've sponsored that. It's like the news that, this hour is sponsored by Visit Norwalk. So in terms of those 3 months, we purchased about a little over 300 spots. That gave us a reach of, again, almost, 1.5 million impressions. So this is a total result for 2022. We paid for 14 million impressions. We got 1.6 organically with social. We look at the emails in terms of how many go out and how many get open. So we had 50,000 email impressions, 35,000 web visits, and 1,500 trackable visits. So far, year to date, at least January through April, we haven't counted May's result yet. You can see we're tracking. Our rate is our pickup rate is a little bit higher right now than it was, than it is than it paces out if you amortize the whole last year. Norwalk for Business, again, similar campaign, a little bit less spending, of course, quite a bit more targeted, but we're promoting the Norwalk for Business brand, the website that launched in November, the ad campaign that launched in January. And again, promoting specific programs on social media like the Kiva Lending Program, which is targeting women and minority-owned businesses and giving them really critical funding. I mean, these are people, if you have an ice cream place, you need a freezer. They're using some of these no interest loans to purchase stuff just to open small businesses, really fund their dreams, if you will. And again, the website, as I mentioned, has a lot of these case studies of people, major businesses and smaller businesses that serve Norwalk's creative economy. We've profiled those same companies in some of our advertising. And again, we're using social as a base, adding LinkedIn to the mix of Facebook and Instagram, and also having sponsored search. So we've got keyword search that's driving, people searching and typing in certain terms are getting messages back to them to come to this Norwalk for Business website and get the information. Again, just as a result, in the span of January to April, since the campaign was launched, we've had almost 500,000 paid impressions, almost 300,000 organic social impressions, and have started to really drive traffic to the Norwalk for Business website. Just looking ahead, we consider Restaurant Week kind of a virtual event. In other words, the promotion is all virtual, and we've kind of banded together with the restaurants to kind of outline what they can offer. So we're planning more of those. We do a holiday guide. We'll do that again. Some new ideas are a fitness week, a Norwalk Made Week, things that businesses that make stuff in Norwalk, more specific offers for families, small business guide, and potentially, branching out into some how-to videos and webinars that would be more focused, of course, on the business community. And then there's, now that there's a actual special events coordinator that will be starting or has started for the city, we can assist with marketing for some actual on-site events too. So the holiday extravaganzas that were done this past holiday time, Christmas time, we did some marketing support for that for the parking authority in terms of some of the graphics for that. So hoping to do that again and also expand some of these actually organized on-site festivals and events that will bring people into the city. And that, I think, is the last slide I had. So if anybody has any comments or questions, I'd be happy to take those.
Thanks, Todd, for all of that. It's great to share this information to the committee, and thank you for all of your hard work. And I will caveat that last slide by saying today was the first day for our special events coordinator to come on board. So be prepared to see a lot of new city thrown events in the coming months and seasons. So we're really excited about that.
Ms. Young?
Thank you, Chair. So with all of that, thank you. That was really great. And to what you just kind of mentioned, Sabrina. So in Fairfield County, where we are, and between Stamford, Norwalk, and Bridgeport, Norwalk represents the sixth, I think, still largest city in Connecticut. So, and then when I think about all the things that we do to attract folks to the city, the Sono Arts, the Oyster Festival, the boat show, car show, and I know I'm missing a lot of other things that we do. And maybe this is more of a Sabrina question. So how are we faring with our partners, with our neighbor, with Stamford or Bridgeport, with drawing people? What are some of the things that we can do to maybe, I don't know if we want to boost or bring in some different sorts of attraction, because the city is growing. I mean, we are growing, and I'm just curious about that and what those numbers look like with all the things that we do. How many, what is that visitor?
So I can speak to that a little bit. So we're one of the sole municipalities that are actually funding marketing for ourselves, not just, make a website and have a resource for people, but actually funding advertisement, which is physically translating to visitors coming here. I'm not sure of any other municipalities nearby that are actually tracking it as heavily as we are, because we have that advertising spend that we're able to do that with. Of course, Stamford has their, SSD, and they're able to fund large events where they sell tickets and they're able to track things that way. We don't have many events that do that at this point in time. But I can, ask around and see what their counts are looking like compared to ours, but their campaigns are very organic compared to ours, which are a little bit of, organic and also paid advertising that we do that's actually bringing people that aren't residents only to our events. And I think it'll be great to see what we're really focused on in economic community development is not only kind of these large events that are great and bring hordes of people to the city, but also these smaller, more reoccurring events, whether they be farmers markets or cornhole tournaments or kind of the small scale stuff that really creates like a great environment and place to live for our residents specifically, not just for out of town folks. So we're excited to see that kind of get launched off the ground and get those numbers for you and hopefully kind of make that connection a little bit better so that there's always something to do, whether it's city sponsored or otherwise. I'm sure all of you know, but all of the events that we've had besides the beach concerts that are thrown by Parks and Rec are all private individuals who raise their own funds, who throw their own events, have their own coordinators. So now we actually have number one funding, but number two, we have staff on board, both on DKA side to do the advertising piece, but also we'll have the special events coordinator to actually have our own events where you're getting that, every first Friday we do something, or, every fall we're doing this. And the holiday extravaganza was kind of the kickoff to show kind of how many people can really come out to these types of things if we really put our minds to it and have these types of reoccurring events going on in the city.
I have to say the holiday extravaganza was absolutely amazing and on all their locations. And so that was really, really great and long overdue for the city. So thank you for that. But I would actually be interested in just rough numbers on what the attendance is like at all of our events, because we've got a lot. Norwalk has a lot going on. We do a lot of unique things. And so even if that's a characteristic that we can, promote, like we do, we're not doing the run of the mill things. We've got very interesting things going on.
I think that's something that we're focused on too, right? Because we want to see, which events are drawing the most people to do more of them. Like if there are things that people really enjoy, let's do more of them. And actually, if you're interested, the state tourism board just actually did an economic impact analysis that took surveys from a lot of event goers that not only quantified them and had demographics about them, but it also kind of asked them what they were doing after. So it shows kind of the economic impact to the city as a whole, to our restaurants, to our retailers, not just for that specific event. So it's interesting to see, you invest in one event, yes, you're spending the money, but the economic greater impact from those individuals being in the city and spending their money at our restaurants and our businesses is so much more than that singular spend that it makes it well worth it.
Thank you, Sabrina.
Of course.
Anybody else? No? Great. Okay, moving on. Oh, did we vote on that? Not yet, right? It's been moved, I believe. Barbara, you moved that? Yep, thank you. All in favor, please raise your hand and signify yes. Great, unanimous. Okay, moving on to C1, advance the submitted applications. Oh, thanks, Todd. Did you have a question?
Thanks for your vote. No, I want to thank you for your vote and your support. And
thank you.
I will bid you
what,
good night.
you've been with us for a while, and that's for a reason, because you produce and you've you've earned the spot. Thank you.
Have a good night.
Okay, C1, advance the submitted applications to the Common Council for their approval at the June 13th, 23 Common Council meeting for their inclusion to the 2023 Connecticut Neighborhood Assistance Act program. And we have a Ms. Katie O'Leary with us, correct?
So Katie's not here, John, but I mentioned that if in the beginning, if you want kind of a quicker rundown, I'm happy to go through it, but it's just advancing the package to the council for its ratification from the state.
Well, thank you, Sabrina, for the description prior during the public hearing. Are there any questions before I call for a vote? All right, who would like to move this item? Thank you, Ms. Young. All in favor, please raise your hand and signify yes. And that is unanimous. Great. All right, item 2, authorize Harry W. Riley to execute all documents that Oh, to execute all documents to execute a contract with Paramita Inc. in the amount not to exceed $31,490 to complete a greenhouse gas inventory and modeling. Yeah, account number noted. Would someone like to move this item? Thank you, Mr. Hubelman. Jess, I believe you will be discussing this item this evening.
Yes, yes. It's not a duplicated item, even though we duplicated the text in the actual resolution. So we will fix that moving forward. Sorry about that.
Please.
So we have a really great opportunity to expand the climate action plan work that we're doing through ARPA. Actually, the RDA is leading that particular effort, and we are going to be wrapping up our climate action plan in the late fall or the winter, and we're going through public outreach now with that particular group, and we're doing different modeling. But we have this really great opportunity that sort of arose when we were looking at different data points and what the city has data points on and what we don't, and also sort of thinking about the efforts that we're putting forward to look at resiliency and coastal management and climate change and some of the stuff that Steve had been talking about earlier when he was on. And the opportunity presents itself with being able to do a greenhouse gas emissions inventory that is citywide, that will actually do an inventory for CO2, CH4, and N2O. And not only doing an inventory baseline, but also then allowing us to use a modeling software that will help us to understand how those greenhouse gas emissions will be impacted positively or negatively, depending on different decisions that we make as far as the city goes. So if we were to implement more solar, if we were to implement different goals, if we were to implement EV charging stations, and so on and so forth. So it allows us to model different investments on what we could be making at the city and how that impacts the greenhouse gas emissions piece. One of the things that we noted that when we were doing the climate action plan is that we were asked for data and metrics that we may be able to provide from a city standpoint, and we don't necessarily have the data and metrics behind the greenhouse gas piece, which also then impacts our ability to really identify goals that we want to be able to achieve in a certain time frame. And that will help us then work with developers in a meaningful way to think about development and how we can incorporate solar and EV charging stations and different LEED type certifications into the buildings that are developed here. So what you see here is an authorization to enter into an agreement for just shy of $32,000 that would allow us to build a greenhouse gas inventory and also use this modeling tool for a year to be able to understand what those investments would look like and the impact. The funding is ARPA funding. And the way that it would work is that we actually designated, and you voted in favor of, as well as finance and the Common Council, to designate $70,000 to the Maritime Aquarium Economic Impact Analysis. And we were able to contract with that particular company for $38,000. So we had a remainder of $32,000 left of ARPA funding that was not utilized in that particular exercise. And so we're actually looking to use the $32,000 that was left over from the economic impact analysis from the Maritime Aquarium to be able to do this exercise. So we would transfer the $32,000 from the Maritime Aquarium impact analysis to the climate action plan work that we have already started, and sign this contract with the company that we're working with, and they'll be using their sub-consultant to then do this work for us.
I just raised my hand to say that this is just a fantastic use of the funds and super, super important for us to do. And I did speak to Brian about it at length, and this is going to help us not only set the metrics for the goals that the city's going to want to do, it's going to help us get grant funding and things like that to help accomplish those goals. So yay, that's just great. Thank you for being so creative.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks to Brian being away so that I can present it to you.
Yeah. Okay, seeing other questions, I will now call for the vote. All in favor, please raise your hand to signify yes. Great, unanimous. Okay, I think we've come to the end of our agenda. I want to thank everyone for spending this time with us. As Mr. Rogers used to say, and if there's nothing else, I will now call for a motion to adjourn. Oh, did we vote on that item? Oh, we did, yes.
No, yeah, we did.
Yeah, now we're voting to motion to adjourn. All in favor?